Good evening, everybody. Hi, it's me, the Chief Astronomer at the Franklin Institute Science Museum, your cool astronomer, Derrick Pitts. Welcome again to Franklin at Home's astronomy program, Night Skies at Home. This is a weekly program that we've been doing ever since we've been in quarantine to reconnect you with the night sky. This is your opportunity to learn everything you want to learn about the night sky so that you can become the astronomer royal in your neighborhood. There's all kinds of great information that you can share at a distance, social distance, of course, with your neighbors about things that are available to be seen in the night sky. Over the last several months, we've been observing Venus over in the western sky, and a lot of people have been asking the question about what's that big bright thing I see over on the western sky? Many people think it might be an airplane headlight. Some people think it's a UFO, but it's actually the planet Venus, something that's commonly seen in the sky. And if you had been part of our program, you would have known about it too, to share with the folks in your neighborhood while we're all practicing social distancing. As I said, there are lots of things to be seen in the evening sky, and this is your opportunity to reconnect with the sky. Think of it like this. It's your universe. Explore it. So we'll be learning all sorts of things about how you can explore the universe right from your neighborhood. And that's the cool thing about this program. It's applicable, useful to you, no matter where you live. If you live in Center City, Philadelphia, there's plenty for you to see. If you live out in rural, suburban areas where the sky is darker, there's plenty for you to see as well. And if you don't even live in the Philadelphia area, guess what? That's fine too, because this information is applicable really all across the globe. Now, here's an interesting piece of information that will help you understand about seeing the night sky. Here we are in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Our latitude, the measure of degrees above the equator on the planet, is 40 degrees north. So we are positioned 40 degrees north of the equator. Well, the sky that we see here at 40 degrees north is the sky that will be seen by everyone around the planet tonight if they live around the same latitude. So folks in California who live at 40 degrees north latitude, they'll see the same sky we see here later tonight. Folks that live over in Asia, in China, for example, at 40 degrees north latitude, will see the same sky we see just later tonight and on around the planet. So if you live at this latitude, near 40 degrees north latitude, everybody around the planet at this latitude will see the same sky eventually once it becomes night for them, okay? Now, the difference is that if you live in the very far north toward the North Pole, well, that's going to change things a little bit. That means you'll see more of the northern portion of the sky and less of the southern portion of the sky. And indeed, if you live farther south, like in Florida or in South America, you'll be able to see the southern hemisphere sky. You know how everybody always wants to see, let's see, what's the constellation? Oh, everybody loves to see the Southern Cross. Ooh, can we see the Southern Cross? Not from where we live here at 40 degrees north latitude, but if you go further south toward Florida and into South America, you'll be able to see it from there. In fact, you don't even have to go to South America. If you go down to the Caribbean for vacation, which hopefully we'll be able to do soon, well, we'll be able to see the Southern Cross from the Caribbean region. If you like to vacation down there in those islands, that's a place you can see the Southern Cross from. So there's a little bit about what you can see from where you are on this planet. But all of this information will be useful to you as you're learning about the night sky. And we have a few more pointers for you like that this evening. So we have a lot to go through this evening and plenty that you'll be able to use in the coming week to help you connect with the night sky. You know, even though we're locked up in quarantine, we can't go out very much or very far. We are supposed to social distance from everybody, wear a mask when you're out in public, things like that. This is a way for us as humans to connect with the universe. There's something very comforting, something relaxing, something, I don't know how to say it, accepting about looking at the evening sky. It just makes you feel good. It gives you a chance to calm down and feel okay. And so if you have the chance to do that on a beautiful late spring, early summer evening, I really recommend you do that because it will help you sort of forget about the difficult things about our world today and help you connect with something more universal, something more cosmic, and hopefully something more comforting. So you can get out and observe the night skies. And here we are, night skies at home, with information for you to make that connection. So what are we going to do tonight? Well, there's all kinds of cool things we're going to do tonight. First of all, we're going to take your questions about human space exploration. Yes, yes, yes. While we usually talk about astronomy things with a little bit of space exploration, we're going to talk mostly about human exploration tonight. And the reason why is because, if you recall from yesterday, the NASA SpaceX Demo 2 flight did not launch yesterday. It didn't launch because of weather reasons. And we're going to look at the weather reasons of why a rocket might not launch. And we'll talk a little bit more about the mission itself. And that way help you prepare for the next launch opportunity, which comes up on Saturday afternoon. So Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the two NASA astronauts that are flying the Crew Dragon spacecraft up to International Space Station, will be leaving Saturday afternoon at 3:22 p.m. 3:22 in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time. That gives you an opportunity to catch this launch. If you weren't able to see it on Wednesday, yesterday, you'll be able to see it on Saturday. That's their next opportunity. If the weather doesn't cooperate or there's some other reason why they can't launch, the next day, Sunday, will be their next opportunity. So we have 2 days coming up when they'll have opportunities to take off for space station. So we'll talk about that. Remember, kids under 10 have not known or easily seen a launch from the United States in their lifetime, because the last time a rocket carrying astronauts to the space station left the United States, that was in 2011, almost 10 years ago. So kids younger than that don't know anything about this yet or haven't had the opportunity to see that happen. So it'll be a new experience for them. I encourage you to look at it through their eyes, use their imagination to learn about the future they're growing up into in terms of space exploration. So be good for you to do that. And then guess what? You can actually follow International Space Station in the night sky during the mission. And as it turns out, there are a number of opportunities to see International Space Station really well from Friday night through next Tuesday night. So from tomorrow night through next Tuesday, there'll be plenty of opportunities to see International Space Station right over Philadelphia. We'll talk about that too. And guess what? I think there might be a chance for us to actually see the Crew Dragon spacecraft as it's on its way to space station. So that would be a real treat to see. We'll talk about that too. Okay, we're also going to talk a little bit about a space station docking simulation that SpaceX has provided. You can build up your skill base in terms of how to operate the Crew Dragon. If you had to do it manually, there's an interface available to you from SpaceX that you can download. You don't even have to download it. It's on the web. And you can go see what it is that the astronauts would be doing, the interface they would use to operate Crew Dragon if they had to dock manually. So we'll take another look at that. I'm also going to show you a poster of the mission profile. Now, the mission profile is the plan of the mission from launch all the way through to docking and then to return to Earth. So it's all in one poster. And I have to warn you, the poster is kind of crammed with information, but it's kind of fun to see it all in one place. And for those of you that are real, what I call motor heads, that want to know the details, this is a good way to identify the details of the profile of the mission. We'll also provide you a link to that poster so you can go find it yourself online and see what it looks like. I'll also point out some things to look for during the launch. That'd be great because I want you to know exactly what's going on and I want you to feel clued into everything that's happening. So the poster will help and some other pointers I'll give you. And then I'll also point out the link where you can go to keep up with everything that's happening during the mission, okay? All right, so also don't forget your questions. I want your questions about human space exploration. Oh, you know the questions, don't you? Do I have to go through them? There's the first obvious one that everybody always wants to ask about people in space. Yeah, I'm not going to ask that question. I'll let somebody else ask that question. But we're going to talk about humans in space. I want your questions because it's a complicated topic and there's a lot of things to discuss and a lot of things to know. Okay, I think we have a question already. So what's our first question?
What determines the window to launch the shuttle?
Oh, what determines the window or the time frame? Let's do it this way. What determines the launch time of the rocket that's being sent to space? Well, a lot of factors go into it, but the primary factor is where do you want the rocket to end up at what time? Where do you want the payload? That's the package that's being carried by the rocket. Where do you want that to get to, and when do you want it to be there? So in the case of Crew Dragon 2, what the flight operators want is they'd like to have that capsule dock with International Space Station at a particular time as it's orbiting the Earth. Now, in order to do that, what they have to do is they have to figure out when the rocket has to leave Earth to carry the spacecraft up to an orbital altitude where it can begin to catch up with International Space Station without using too much fuel. Now, they also have to do this at a time that makes sense for all of the rest of the operation. And what do I mean by that? Well, once the rocket takes off, the first thing that everybody is concerned with is that the rocket is operating properly so that they don't have to cancel the mission just after it leaves the launch pad. Now, if it had to do that, the spacecraft could splash down in the Atlantic Ocean just off the coast of Florida. But they have to have a rescue crew out there. And in fact, what they do is they provide rescue crews along the path until it gets to a certain altitude. And then the next stage comes in where if they had to cancel the mission before it gets to International Space Station, well, that means the Crew Dragon would have to land someplace between where it took off and where that problem happened, or just after where that problem happened. So they need to have rescue crews ready to go out along the flight path. And so this all has to be coordinated to make sure that everything can work together all at the same time. So these are a number of the things that contribute to deciding when the spacecraft is going to launch. Now, another thing you may have heard is something called an instantaneous launch window. Instantaneous launch window. Well, what that means is that the spacecraft has to launch at exactly a particular time in order to accomplish all of these things, rather than have what's called a launch window that's wider, where you can launch anywhere between, say, 10 a.m. in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's a pretty wide launch window. And the way this is described is we say that the launch window opens at 10 o'clock and closes at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. In this particular instance, for this mission, the launch window is instantaneous. So if it's 3:22, if the rocket's not ready to go at 3:22 or the weather's not good at 3:22, they can't go. They have to wait until the next day so that everything will be lined up properly so that they can meet International Space Station successfully. Okay, that was a really great question. So let's go on now and let's talk about some of the sky phenomena that we're going to see in the evening sky this week. And then we'll come back to the space exploration part, looking for your questions about human space exploration. Okay, so now, I don't know if you've noticed it, but sunrise is coming earlier and earlier and earlier. It's now 5:35 in the morning, almost the earliest it can be for the whole year. We're still picking up a little over a minute of extra light time per day, but that is slowing down as we approach the first day of summer, just under 1 month away now. So June 21st, June 22nd, we're coming up on that date. It's just under a month away. And at that point, we will have reached the earliest that the sun can rise and the latest that the sun can set. Sunset right now is coming at 8:20 in the evening. It still has another 15 minutes or so to gain in the evening. So this means we'll still have these long evenings going into June. A wonderful time to enjoy the beautiful weather and to be outside because of the astronomy of how all this works. Over on the western side of the sky right now, if you're looking for Venus, guess what, folks? Too late, gone for the season. It's been replaced, though, by its diminutive partner in the sky, Mercury. Tiny little Mercury is the bright dot that you'll see a little less than halfway up the western sky after sunset. So after the sun sets and the sky is beginning to darken, look for a bright dot out on the western sky. That will be the planet Mercury. Binoculars will really help you with that because Mercury is small, can be difficult to see, but it's a real reward if you can catch it. So on a good clear evening, after the sun has set, now you can use your binoculars to scan the western sky to see if you can find elusive Mercury. It won't be around very long because Mercury is the planet that orbits the sun faster than any other planet, so it'll zip out of our skies in just a few weeks. So that's one to catch. All right, now, Over in the morning sky, well, we still have Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Jupiter and Saturn are closer together to each other in the southeastern sky. Mars is further up on to the eastern portion of the sky, and you can see all three of them without any optical aid at all. You don't need binoculars, don't need a telescope. But here's the catch: 4:30 in the morning. You have to be up at 4:30 because unfortunately, by 5 a.m., the sky's too bright for you to see them easily. If that's when you're up and out though, 5 o'clock, give it a shot. But if you really want to get a good view of them, well, you'll have to get up at 4:30 to see them. Now, in just a few weeks, I'll tell you a little secret, you'll be able to stay up late at night and catch them just as they're rising in the east. And then that way you can go to bed by 2 o'clock in the morning, let's say. Something like that, okay? So those are the parameters you have for that. All right, now tonight, the constellation that we're going to talk about for this week is Cancer. We're going to talk about Cancer. But in addition, we're also going to cover two constellations or shapes of stars that everybody loves to see, and that's the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. We'll talk about those two. We'll also talk about where the Milky Way is in the evening sky. People love to see the Milky Way if they can, and the Milky Way is this band of light that we can see stretching across a darker sky that marks the arms of our spiral galaxy. And when we're looking out toward the Milky Way, this rich band of stars, it looks like a soft glow in the evening sky. What we're really seeing is the combined light of the billions of stars in our galaxy that make up the spiral arms. And as we look in that direction, we're looking along the spiral arms. Well, here's the other thing, though. If we look in a 90-degree direction away from the arms, we're looking at the North Galactic Pole and the South Galactic Pole. And we can imagine a line between the two, and that's the axis around which our galaxy rotates. We'll see that on a map pretty soon. Okay, so space station, as I said, that's going to be visible. We'll take a look at that too. But let's get started first with all of this other stuff that we'd like to see in the night sky. And we'll be looking for your questions about space exploration as well, human space exploration. So let's get on with this and we'll see what things look like. All right, I'm just going to reach over and grab my computer here, bring it over to here because I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see everything that's happening. Okay, yeah, here I am here. Hi, folks. Yeah, I know it's a little close. I'll back up a little bit. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to share my screen so I can get out to see what it is we want to see. Okay, here we go. Don't worry, I'm just sharing my screen here. I'm going to zip right over to here where you can see here I am on the Zoom right here. And I'm going to minimize myself here so I have a little bit more room. There we go. Okay, first things first, let's go out into the night sky and take a look for some of these objects that we talked about that you'll be able to see. And of course, I'm going to use my favorite new program these days, and that's called Stellarium Web Online. And here I have Stellarium Web Online, and hopefully you can see it. I'm going to get rid of that menu bar over on that side. And I'm just going to stretch things across the page here so everybody can see. And the one last thing I'm going to do here is let me see. Let's see if we can go to full screen. And there we are. Okay. So now this is showing the sky as it appears, if you'll follow my arrow, for 9:45 p.m. right down here in the lower right corner. And we're pointing around to the north over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing us around to the west because we're going to start at sunset. And here we are coming around at 9:45 p.m. Now, 9:45, it's a little bit late for how I want to start. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the magic of the planetarium system I have here to adjust the sky and adjust the time. And here we are now just after sunset. Just after sunset. Let me clear this up a little bit here. And you'll see that right over here in the west, a little bit north of west, there's a marker for Venus right there, and there's a marker for Mercury right there. So because the sky is still so bright, I'm going to take that out and see if I can make the sky a little darker. There we are. And now you can see there's Venus very low on the horizon, and Mercury is right up behind this tree. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Okay, we'll get rid of that. And I'm also going to drop the landscape. Now, you see this little line right here of bright stuff? That's where the landscape goes. You can see the sun is just below the horizon. So that's where the horizon is. And here's where Mercury is. Okay, got that? I'm going to bring the landscape back just so you can see where we are. Okay, so there's Venus. There's Mercury right behind it once more. See, there's Mercury right there behind the tree, okay? Right in there. So you'll be able to see that in the evening. And what I did was I got rid of the atmosphere. If I bring the atmosphere back, you can see at this time what the sky looks like. But guess what? We have an added reward tonight, and that's the moon. It's almost at first quarter. By tomorrow at noon, the moon will be at fully first quarter, what you call a half moon, and we'll be able to see this without any difficulty in the evening sky. Well, the cool thing about this is that this is the perfect time to observe the moon with binoculars, because now you'll have the proper illumination that will allow you to see depth and height on the surface of the moon created by mountains for height, and depth created by craters on the surface. So with your pair of binoculars, you can scan along that line that separates the dark half of the moon from the light half of the moon, and you'll be able to see that wonderful relief on the surface. It'd be very exciting, and you can look for all kinds of really cool details. You know, there are lots of really great moon maps online that you can use to identify specific locations. I highly recommend you give them a try, because one of the things you can do is you can look for the Apollo landing sites. In fact, at first quarter, the Apollo 11 landing site, the very first spacecraft that took astronauts to the moon, that landing site, well, that's visible. You can see where it is. You can't see anything of the surface because it's way too small. Your binoculars won't give you enough magnification, so don't worry about that, but you can get a general idea of where they've landed. Well, as it turns out, the moon right now happens to be close to several bright stars, and those bright stars are part of the constellation Leo the Lion. If you recall, we talked about Leo a couple of weeks ago, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the sky get a little bit darker so that you can see the stars of Leo as they show up. Here we are right here. There we go. Here's the backwards question mark of Leo right here, the bright star Regulus, and then back over here on the back end of Leo, this is the tail of Leo at a star called the Nebula. And if we put some constellation lines up, hold on, there we go. Now we can see the backwards question mark, and we can see this right triangle pointing off to the east. That is Leo the Lion right there. So if you go outside and see this, if you see this, I recommend you go back inside and lay down for a few minutes because the sky shouldn't look like this, okay? All right, great. So now, given that this is Leo the Lion, imagine that this is the head of the lion and the moon is right at the lion's mouth. See how this is the mane and this is the tail? Well, here's the back of the lion right here. Here's the easy way to find the Big Dipper. Just go from the back of the lion straight up, and you'll come right up here to the Big Dipper itself in the constellation called Ursa Major. There's the Big Dipper, 7 bright stars, 3 in the handle, 4 in the bowl. There we are. You can see that right there without any difficulty at all. So there's the easy way to find your way to the Big Dipper using Leo the Lion and the moon. And of course, we are now right out here, and that brings us to our constellation for the evening, which is Cancer. Here's Cancer right here, just above Gemini. Last week we talked about Gemini, one of the Zodiac group of constellations, and here's Cancer right here. Cancer is kind of interesting. I mean, oh yes, it's a wonderful constellation for all of you that are born under the sign of Cancer. However, unfortunately, Cancer itself doesn't have any bright stars. It really doesn't, so it's difficult to see in the sky. In fact, what you have to do is you have to find the 2 bright stars of Gemini, look toward Leo, and then imagine the space between them. You won't see very much, but that's where Cancer is. Now, Cancer does happen to be home to 2 interesting things. One is something called the Crab Nebula. The Crab Nebula is a spot where a star exploded way back in the year 1054 AD. In that year, on July 4th of that year, a star exploded in the constellation Cancer, and it was so bright it was visible in the evening sky for 2 weeks as the brightest star in that region, easily, with no problem at all. And there's a really lovely nebula that's been left over from that you can see if you go look for pictures of it, and you can find it. So that's one thing that's there. And that nebula, by the way, is 6,000 light years away from Earth. But as it turns out, there's another interesting feature in Cancer, and it's a star. And the star is called 55 Cancri. Now, Cancri is the wording or the way in which the word Cancer is changed to use as a descriptive of that particular constellation. So the star 55 Cancri is a very important star among the stars of Cancer because it has a planet that seems to be like Earth. It's called 55 Cancri E. The star is 55 Cancri, and the E planet is the fifth planet around that particular star. So A, B, C, D, E, 55 Cancri E. It's described as what's called a super Earth. In fact, this was supposed to be a planet that was bigger, more massive than Earth. And at first, the first information we got from it told us that it seemed to have more carbon than oxygen. And that carbon was under tremendous pressure on the planet. So much so that there was a very thick layer of diamonds on this planet as part of the crust of the planet. Well, before you jump in a spacecraft and head out to go dig the diamonds out of 55 Cancri East, turns out that's not the case at all. It's not a diamond planet. It turns out that there is actually more oxygen there than there is carbon. And once all the data was refined, we found out a few other things about the planet. It's not Earth-like at all. Turns out the daytime temperature there is, you ready for this? A sweltering 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. And at night, well, cools right off down to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, not that great at all, huh? Okay, so these are the constellations that we're learning now in this portion of the sky before they disappear. Last week we did Gemini. This week we've talked about Cancer right here. We've already talked about Leo. Guess what's coming up next? As we spin across the sky, the constellation Virgo will be up next week. So we'll learn all about that. Virgo's a really cool constellation because it's the home of a tremendous number of galaxies. So we'll talk about that when we come back to next week. So as we looked out in the sky, we could easily see where the moon is here. We have the constellation figures that you can see. We're going to let those take a break. And what we're going to do is we're going to zoom up until tomorrow, and we're going to zoom out to tomorrow morning. So as you can see from my time chart here, I'm already at midnight. And guess what? Jupiter is already above the horizon. Let me go back. By 12:30 in the morning, Jupiter is above the horizon. How about that? So that means you don't have to get up at 4:30 in the morning. You can be up late at night and see this. So there's one object. Let's go a little bit further. That's 1 o'clock in the morning. And you know what? Here we are at 2:30. I have Jupiter here. I have Mars over here. This is over in the east, southeast. Any idea what that object might be? Guess what? Turns out that's the planet Saturn. So if you happen to be up very, very late, 2:30 in the morning, you'll find bright Jupiter. Right next to it is Saturn. And then a little further on is Mars. So there now you can see how these objects are arranged in the sky. And if we come around to dawn, let's see, we're at 3 a.m. Here we are now at 4:30. They're now around in the south, and you can begin to see the glow of sunrise coming over on the eastern horizon. They're going to disappear as we gain more and more sunlight coming into the sky. So by 5 o'clock, they're almost gone and hard to see. Okay, so there's our tour around the evening sky for the night into the next morning. So you've been able to identify what things you can see in the evening sky. Started out with Gemini, went on to Cancer and Leo. Next week again, we'll go on and we'll do Virgo. So now that we've had a chance to see those things in the sky, see where the planets are in the evening and in the morning, let's move on. Now, we wanted to talk about space exploration. So we're going to let this program disappear here now, just a moment while we close this out. And we're going to move on from here. Okay, so now, where to next? Well, where we're going off to next is we're going off to space exploration. As I mentioned, coming up on Saturday, we have this really wonderful launch that's going to be coming up. I'm going to go right out to, here we are. There we go. I'm just going to let this run in the background for us while we're watching. There we go. Okay, so this is a YouTube video of the SpaceX 2 demo mission that's going to attempt its next launch coming up on Saturday at 3:22 in the afternoon. Doug Hurley and Bob Bankin are the astronauts that are going to take the Crew Dragon up to International Space Station. They'll arrive the next day. If they launch on Saturday, they'll dock with Space Station on Sunday, and then they're going to be there for at least 6 weeks. And they'll be performing experiments and doing all the other tasks and chores that are being done by the other astronauts on board International Space Station while they're there. There are 3 astronauts there already, so the 2 added will bring the complement to 5. And then after 6 weeks or so, they'll be bringing the Crew Dragon back to Earth and testing it for its re-entry flight as well. Well, on Saturday, you might recall that they were supposed to launch at 4:30 in the afternoon, but it didn't work out because of weather conditions. So what were the weather conditions on Wednesday that prevented them from launching? Well, basically you would say it was cloudy, but it was actually more than that. Not only was it cloudy, but it was rainy all day long. And in addition to that, there were thunderstorms in the area and there was lightning in the area. And you know what? Astronauts don't really like to launch on a day when the weather is like that. And the reason why they don't like to do that is because launching on days like that causes all kinds of problems with the spacecraft itself. If winds are too high, it makes it difficult for the spacecraft to stay on course. So they don't want that. If there's lightning that's occurring, they really would prefer not to launch when there's lightning happening because, of course, what happens is the lightning can cause problems for the spacecraft as well. So there are a set of conditions known as launch weather criteria. And on your screen right now, you can see the NASA fact sheet that explains the Falcon 9 Crew Dragon launch weather criteria. Now, in this list, there are 14 different conditions or situations that will prevent a spacecraft from launching. Now, first of all, let's look at the first one. We'll just look at a couple of these and then you can go back and look at it on your own to see what they all are. So first of all, if the sustained winds at the 162-foot level of the launch tower exceed 30 miles per hour, that's not a good weather condition because the wind might be too high. It could blow the spacecraft off course. And let's just go to another one over here that I think is really interesting. On this side, if there happens to be a thunderstorm that has shown lightning within the last 30 minutes, within 10 miles of the launch pad, that's a cause to cancel the flight. So there are just 2 reasons right there why a flight might be scrubbed due to weather. So you might think, if the sky is cloudy, that might be enough to keep them from launching. Well, no, it's not really enough to keep them from launching if it's just cloudy. But you know, there could be other conditions that they can't see, even if it's cloudy. So here's one that's interesting right here. Don't launch through a cloud layer greater than 4,500 feet thick that extends into freezing temperatures unless other specific criteria can be met. So they don't want the spacecraft to have to fly through freezing layers of clouds. So these are all really interesting, and these are situations that the launch directors pay very close attention to because they want to make sure that the space flight is as safe as possible. That's the most important thing, and that's one of the things that they pay closest attention to around weather, and that is making sure that the weather conditions are good so that the flight can be safe. Okay, we must have some questions by now.
We do. We have a lot of questions. How many trips to space have astronauts made since the moon landing?
There's a great question. How many trips to space have astronauts made since the moon landings in 1969 through 1971? Oh my goodness, if I could count them all up, I could give you a big number, but are we just talking about American space flights, or are we talking about space flights of astronauts from all around the world? I would say there have been several hundred space flights carrying astronauts into space. So the American space program has had all of the shuttle program missions and all of the space station missions that have been, for which the Russian space agency provided launch capability to get astronauts into space. So let me do it this way. I think the last time I looked at a number for how many people had actually been to space, the number is somewhere around 560 people have been to space, about 560. Not many, because they only go like 2 or 3 at a time for the most part. During the space shuttle program, there might have been 6 or 7 at a time, but the number is still somewhere around 550, 560. but I would say that there have been hundreds of flights carrying astronauts to space if we combine both the American astronaut program, the Russian astronaut program, and let's not forget the Chinese space program as well, that also sends astronauts into space. Okay, what's up next?
Have you been tracking the satellites that Elon Musk launched, the Starlings?
Oh, there's a really great question. Have I been tracking the satellites that SpaceX has been launching of the Starlink system? Well, I'm going to do something a little bit unusual for you this evening. Let's go out and let's take a look at this particular program that you've heard me speak of before, Heavens Above. Now, Heavens Above is a program that allows us to figure out where we can see spacecraft. But what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to show you the Starlink passes as shown by Heavens Above. And they actually have a really neat new feature that I'll show you as well. So let's look at the Starlink passes. So first of all, here's a list of satellites. What I did was I put in my information for where I'm located right up here in the top corner, so I'll get an accurate reading of where to look. And I'm going to make my choice of Starlink passes for all objects from a launch. And look what it gives me. It gives me this long list. Oh my gosh, look at that. Oh, incredible. Way too long. But you know what? They're all happening at around the same time. And the reason why is because when they fly by as a long string of satellites. And so for each one of the satellites, you'll notice that there's a time for when it reaches its highest point. Now, what's most important about this is the brightness of the object. Because even if the object is there, if it's not bright enough, you can't see it. So here's the brightness in stellar magnitudes. So let's start right here with 28th of May. This one right here, 6.0 magnitude. That means it's just barely visible. Just barely visible. So here's what you need to do. If you use a list like this, you need to look along and see when you can find the lowest number you can find. And if that low number isn't somewhere around 1 point something or even -0, well, guess what? It means it's going to be challenging to see. So as I look at this list, every last one of these is down close to the level at which I won't be able to see it. The brightest one I can see here measures, let's see, I thought I saw 4.0. No, the best I'm seeing is a 4.7. That's not good enough for me to go out and look. So that means that in this group, you won't see them. But there are brighter satellites you can see. And so let's go back over here. I want to show you the live sky view, which is a new feature that they've added here. And in the live sky view, it looks like it's a regular sky map, just like we see over on Stellarium Web. But what this one does is it gives you a list of all the satellites that are currently available in the sky at this time. So here's what I can do. I'm going to pick one from the list right over here. I'm going to pick Starlink 1148. And look what the map does. It now shows me the path of Starlink 1148 across the sky, and it gives me all the information I need to know about that particular satellite. And I can go through and I can pick different satellites if I wish. I'll take the Cosmos 1464 rocket, and now I can see there's a different flight path. So this is another tool that you can use to help you find your way around the night sky when you're looking for satellites. So for the Starlink question, that's how you manage to do that kind of observation. What's up next?
Would you tell us again why the SpaceX mission was an instantaneous launch instead of having a launch window?
Oh, sure. I talked about that just a few minutes ago about why it was an instantaneous launch as opposed to being a launch in a launch window. And the reason why it was an instantaneous launch is because they need to launch that spacecraft at exactly the correct time for it to arrive where it needs to be to meet International Space Station the next day. So because of that, they have to launch it at exactly the right time so that all of the other coordinated rescue services can be in place at the correct time. Also, just in case those rescue services are needed along the flight path as they head up to orbit. Okay, so now, speaking of Crew Dragon spacecraft, I mentioned that there's a way for you to brush up on your skills as a flight controller, as a pilot, or even the commander of such a spacecraft of the Crew Dragon. And SpaceX has provided for us this really great experience of figuring out what it's like to actually fly the spacecraft. So I'm out now at the SpaceX website at their control interface for how to dock the Crew Dragon with International Space Station. So you can see here Space Station right up here. There's the target I would be heading for. And here's my control window that shows me everything I want to see. And here are my controls over here. So you can manually control the spacecraft to get it to head where you want it to go so that you can try your skill at being able to dock the spacecraft. Okay, so you can see what this looks like. All of these sections right here give you indicators of motion. And if I give this a little bit of motion here so you can see what's happening, you'll see what's going to happen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the spacecraft move to the left. And I'm going to give it plenty of power to do that so that you'll be able to see that motion pretty quickly. So there it is. You can see the spacecraft is moving over to the left. And that's going to take it over to where it needs to go. So that's a really fun toy that you can play with. And if you get in the jam, guess what you can do? There's a little reset button right here. So if you find yourself getting too far off course, you can use that to reset yourself. And all you have to do is you just use this hexagon right here. You have to line up your target here in the center with this target right here, right through the center of these hexagons. So this is what the pilots are going to be doing when they're trying to dock the spacecraft coming up on Saturday. So I just made a reset there. I wanted to show you that so you can see what it looks like. Let's take some more questions about space exploration.
Okay, Jesse wants to know what is your favorite constellation?
Oh, hi, Jesse. You want to know what my favorite constellation is? Let's see. You know, it's a tough one to answer because there's so many cool constellations. You know, Orion's a really good one, but that's a winter constellation. But you know what? Here's a constellation I really like. In fact, there are two constellations that are close to each other and visible in the summer sky. Cygnus the Swan looks like a large cross in the northern sky in the summer, and it's easy to see. So it's actually called the Northern Cross, and you can see that without too much difficulty because it looks just like that, like a big plus sign in the sky. So that's kind of cool, and I think it's cool because of the stars that are there. And then right next door to that is a much smaller constellation. So that was Cygnus. The smaller constellation next to it, Jesse, is called Lyra the Harp, L-Y-R-A. I like Lyra because it has a cool set of stars. Two pair of two stars that are both orbiting each other that also orbit a common point of gravity. And so it's fun to see these two pair of two stars together in the sky. Lyra also has a feature called the Ring Nebula. That's easy to see in a pair of binoculars. I'm sorry, easy to see in a small telescope. So that's cool to see too. So in the summer, Cygnus and the constellation Lyra are two constellations I like. Okay, what's up next?
Last week you mentioned that astrological signs are determined by the sun being in a constellation. Since one cannot see stars in sunlight, how do astrologers know which constellation the sun was in?
Yeah, there's a really great question. How did astrologers understand that the sun was in a particular constellation? Well, they did it by deductive reasoning, actually. They followed the motion of planets through that path of constellations, followed the moon also through that path of constellations, and noticed that it seemed as if these planets and the moon were sort of coinciding with the position of the sun in the sky during the day. Now, the way they did this was they watched the motion of the planets at night, watched the motions of the moon at night, and extrapolated, figured out where those planets were going to eventually end up at any point during the course of the year. And then they realized that the sun was doing the same thing. So by figuring out the rate at which it seemed they were moving, they could figure out when the sun was going to be in what constellation of the zodiac group. So this took a long time of observation to do. Hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. It happened so long ago, we have no record of who actually did this. But I would guess that it took hundreds of years of observation, and this was done by cultures all over the world. So it wasn't done by just one culture, but every culture that observed the sky had brilliant people who could figure out how this worked. And so that's how we end up where we are today. What's another question we have? Thanks for that, Jesse.
Someone wants to know where the Pleiades.
Oh, where are the Pleiades? Well, first of all, what are the Pleiades? The Pleiades happen to be a small cluster of stars that look like a little tiny dipper. They're part of the constellation Taurus, which is one of the winter constellations associated with Orion the Hunter. Now, since Orion as a winter constellation has already set down below the western horizon, with Gemini following close behind, that means we won't be able to see it in the evening sky until late next fall, early next winter. If you want to get some idea of where Orion is, go outside in the evening, look to the west, look for the constellation Gemini, the two bright stars, Pollux and Castor, mark their heads. Come down to where their feet are, down on the horizon. And then if you kept going down below the horizon, you'd come to Orion. And then a little bit further on, you'd come to Taurus. And finally, the Pleiades. The Pleiades, by the way, that name is the name that's given to 7 bright stars. They're often called the 7 sisters. And I'll tell you a little hint about those. In Japan, that grouping has the name Subaru. So guess what? If you look at the logo on a Subaru automobile, you'll be able to see that group of stars of the Pleiades right on the logo of the car. Please make sure the car is not moving when you go out to look at the logo. Thank you very much. Yeah, you'll be able to see it. Okay, what's up next? Okay. No more questions just yet. Okay, well, while you're thinking of one other question, I'm going to show you just one other thing. What I wanted to show you was, I wanted to show you what the mission profile looked like. So let me see if I can find my mission profile slide here. What did I do with my mission profile image? Let's see. My mission profile. Oh, yes, I know where my mission profile image is. Thank you. Excuse me for looking here. Sorry. You know what? I have misplaced my mission profile image. I'm going to see if I can, well, I shouldn't put you through that rather than have you look with me while I try to find out. Let's do this instead. I want to make sure you know what to look for during the launch and the demo where the launch activities will be most easily broadcast. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out to this place called Launch America. Launch America is NASA's site where they are going to have all of the contact information, not the contact information, but all the information you need to follow the launch coming up on Saturn, to follow the mission, in fact. This is just the opening page. And as you scroll through, it will give you all sorts of information about International Space Station, the commercial crewed program, which this is part of, the astronauts themselves, Bob Bankin and Doug Hurley. You'll see that there are links in the program here. And there are these wonderful images that show you what the inside of the Crew Dragon looks like. So there's Doug Hurley, and here's there's Bob Bankin right there, and here's Doug Hurley. They have these new cool spacesuits that are kind of fun. And here's the information that tells you exactly what they're going to be doing as they launch into space. So this is a good place to get started with that information of what's going to be happening during the launch. So if you click on any of these links, like the commercial crew program, for example, it will take you out to the commercial crew program where you can see all of the astronauts that are going to be involved in this. And you can see here that there's up to the minute information. There's a press kit that has all kinds of really cool information as well. I highly recommend you take a look at that. That'll be fun to see. And that way you'll be able to keep up with everything that's happening there. Any other questions at the moment?
How long will the launch last on Saturday?
Question is, how long will the launch last on Saturday? Well, if everything goes according to plan and the spacecraft takes off at 3:22 in the afternoon, it takes about 8 minutes to get to Earth orbit. So if they leave at 3:22, by 3:30 p.m., they'll be in Earth orbit. Now, it'll take them another day to catch up with International Space Station. Not quite another day to catch up with Space Station, but they'll be in space pretty quickly. So before, let's see if I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. Before the booster rocket actually lands, they will already be in orbit. So the booster is going to land about 9 minutes, maybe 10 minutes after the spacecraft takes off. After the launch happens, the booster will come back and land automatically at near where it took off. Well, by that time, they will already be in orbit. So it's not a long ride at all. Okay, so we've taken some time this evening to run through a whole batch of stuff. We had an opportunity to talk about weather conditions for launch. We talked a little bit about what's going to happen on Saturday with the launch. We already talked about that last week and had an opportunity to go through what turned out to be a practice run on Wednesday. We also talked about constellations that are available in the evening sky. The Big Dipper, we talked about Leo the Lion, Gemini. We also talked about the moon and its position and how this is a really great time to catch the moon at first quarter. There are also really wonderful opportunities to view International Space Station coming up in this next week. In fact, as it turns out, there are excellent passes over Philadelphia between Friday night and Tuesday night, so I highly recommend you get out and take a look for them. You know, one of my favorite programs that I like to use these days is called See a Satellite. This is one that allows you to get the information you need to observe satellites right where you live. So I brought that image up so that you can see it. And let's go to tomorrow evening at 10:38 p.m. And you'll be able to see now in my screen view, right over here is what it looks like, space station looks like as if you were looking down on the planet. Here we are right here in the Philadelphia area. Space station is flying by here. And then over here in this panel, you can see where space station shows up in the sky right here and then passes overhead in your neighborhood is what this image will look like, because this image is provided by Google Streetview, and they use Google Streetview superimposed over the path of space station so that you'll understand how you can see it in your sky. So they're great passes Friday night through Tuesday night. Hopefully the weather will cooperate for this, and there may be an opportunity for us to see Crew Dragon as well. I'm going to jump back over here for just one hot second just to show you where that is. Here I am back again at heavensabove.com. Last thing we'll do here and I'll show you, here's the page for Crew Dragon visible passes. And you'll notice there are some dates and there are some good times here. There's an opportunity right there on June 1st to see it. It'll be nice and bright and it'll be nice and high in the sky. That's what the information says right now, but come back and check this on Saturday evening just to be sure. Okay, so we're done with all the screen work here. I'm going to stop my screen sharing. Here I am back again. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We've had a great opportunity to go through a tremendous amount of stuff that will help you connect with the evening sky. Please remember, if you want to learn the sky well, it doesn't take very much. All you have to do is go out on every clear evening or every other clear evening, spend about 5 to 10 minutes refreshing your knowledge about the night sky, using the star maps that we've provided to help you find your way around. And in 2 weeks' time, you will have learned all of the constellations that are available to be seen at this time of this year. You can amaze your friends with this fabulous information. And guess what? I guarantee you, very few people in your neighborhood know how to find International Space Station. You can invite them outside with good social distancing to see International Space Station, and you can share the experience with your family across the city as well. You can make it a group project that you can do while enjoying social distancing at the same time. And you can see International Space Station. Put your hand up and wave at them. That'll be a wonderful thing to do. Lets the astronauts know you're thinking about them as they're flying by. You'll see them. Of course, they won't be able to see you, but it'll be a great thing to do anyway to connect with humans flying in space. Don't forget, people have been living and working in space for the last 20 years without any problem at all. You know, if there's anything the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us, it's that science really matters. Even while the Franklin Institute is closed, all of us are working hard to find new ways to continue our ever important mission of sharing science and technology education, like this program you're watching now. And I hope you've enjoyed this program and hope you'll join us again next week. If you're able, we would really be grateful if you'd consider making a donation to the Franklin Institute today or any other day, really. We would really appreciate that. We really do value your support. It means a lot to us. And if you can make a donation, we'd really appreciate that. Visit our website, fi.edu, or click on the link in our post to give a gift. As always, we thank you so much for your support. If you go to the website, check out all the other great Franklin at Home programs and projects that we have available for you to do all the way across the board, A to Z, soup to nuts in science, every kind of activity you like this one. So join us again next week. We'll follow up with the mission of SpaceX Crew Demo Dragon 2. We'll see what happens with that. And we'll look at all sorts of other great things coming up in the evening sky. Thanks a lot for joining me. I'm the Franklin Institute Chief Astronomer, the cool astronomer, Derrick Pitts. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. Don't forget, it's your universe. Explore it. Thanks a lot, folks. See you next week.